All right, welcome everybody to the City of Lake Forest Park City Council Special Committee of the Whole meeting. This is Thursday, January 23rd, 2025. Calling the meeting to order. And I guess we're going straight to discussion items. We're not even talking about the agenda. So, okay, so we'll go into discussion items. Topics for council retreat. All right, so I think you all got by email and it's also in the packet, the minutes from the last retreat. And so I'm thinking that not a terrible thing to do would be to kind of go over how many of those benchmarks we hit. So does somebody want to start talking about those? For instance, yeah, for instance, I will say chance to look at them and that up here.
Well, Vice Chair Furchani, if I might jump in.
Go ahead.
Second, I'm happy to talk about things that we were able to affect over the last year. So previously, item number one was develop a mobility infrastructure program that includes roads, sidewalks, and walkways. Such a program should consider safety, fiscal impacts, equity, and opportunities for creating connections throughout the city. We are moving along with that. We have the transpo study that's coming back to us about things that have been requested by the council for crosswalks, additional traffic safety cameras, some other items there. Took us a little bit longer than we expected, as you all know, with your infinite patience about the traffic cameras to get those sorted out. And now it's a very effective program. As you know, speeds have come down in the Brookside area from over 31 miles an hour down to 23.2. It keeps dropping. So now we have a better idea of where our revenues are coming from relative to that program. Again, we want it to be zero, but we'll see where it goes. If people are going to speed, they're going to be paying for our sidewalks. So that program is going to be informed by what Transpo comes back with relative to the additional implementations of sidewalk or crosswalks and traffic cameras on both of our state routes.
And they're for very specific.
Very specific, yeah. So
including, I believe, 40 of them on 78.
That's correct. And just to correct the record, there was a little bit of confusion about 40th and 178. That is being studied. We should have that study hopefully in the next couple of weeks. And there was a little miscommunication out with the public regarding 40th and 178. So I tried to correct the record and send some emails out to folks yesterday about that, so they understand that is absolutely something we're looking at. And so our traffic calming group was not aware specifically of what the progress was on that, but we've got that clarified.
And to clarify, another thing I'd heard from a member of the public is that the traffic study itself, the walking volumes and the traffic volumes are studied throughout the year, starting in September, correct?
I can't speak.
That's correct.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so when I met with John Pascal prior to initiating the contract, he wanted to wait until school got back in. So when school was back in, he said that's the best time to collect your volumes, both traffic and pedestrian data. So
Thank you. Okay, so I don't know how you all want to handle this, but do you want to see if we need to do a follow-up on this in terms of the agenda for our upcoming retreat? Or do you want to do the whole list first and then come back to basically doing a to-do list for the retreat?
Maybe get an update of everything first, and then that'll help us to prioritize, I think, rather than trying to do it one off.
Love it. Let's do it that way. Okay.
You bet.
So does anybody have any other comments on the mobility infrastructure program update wise? Okay, then we'll move on to the next one. Hire a grant GIS employee to create detailed data, etc. So I guess basically we haven't, but it doesn't mean that there aren't things in the works.
So the grant coordinator
Coordinator
was discussed in this last budget. That's something that we'll be looking at during 2025, but found I think the best way for us to do this is on a contract basis. and there is a grant consortium within the state of Washington. Where you can, and I've got that up on my computer. You can go and identify by kind of their expertise, what's available out there, to get some rates. So we'll be taking a look at that. Especially now, public works is getting staffed back up, but refocus my efforts elsewhere.
So it's a list of private contractors as opposed to state employees or something like that.
Correct, they're all private, they're independents. It's just a consortium of independent grant writers that come together. This website is a clearinghouse for agencies that need that type of assistance.
And their performance, even though they're not city employees necessarily familiar with cities, the city's particular history. In your experience, have they done reasonable jobs at the grants they try to go for?
Yeah, and the ones that I've had in the past, they have an expertise in writing grants. They know what, those who reviewing the grants are looking for. They will need the staff expertise to get them the data they need. But the bulk of the work comes in actually writing the grants, answering the questions appropriately, given the funding source.
And then there's the flip side of that, right, which is the administration and reporting out on the grants. Would we be able to use the same kind of folks for that kind of thing? Because I know the staff capacity is somewhat limited.
You're talking as far as like reporting back to, if we receive the grant, that work back.
Right, and all the documentation that you have to get back to the granting agency.
I think at that point that falls under project managers. That's how we've done it in the past. There's been a lot of legwork done. Commerce, CFT, that our project managers, myself, have been the ones, and Mark's in the same boat of reporting back to those agencies on successes.
That's super.
And a lot of that work comes from whoever you hire to do the work, or your engineering firms, your architecture firms, whoever's doing the work. They help you with a lot of that reporting.
Great. Does anybody else have a update they want on any particular aspect of number 2?
GIS employee, that's not something that was funded. We are part of the GIS consortium. I think that's through AWC, and we were using that pretty significantly. Previous public works director and project manager had gotten that up and going again. That's obviously slipped a little bit, but once we get that department staff back up, we do have access to that. We do, that's a benefit that we pay for. So we will be utilizing that for any GIS needs. We have anything larger and outside that scope, we'd have to look at a contract or something. Depend on how it came together with the consultant, what the project was and how we can gather that data.
If I may, that was kind of the point I was gonna make, is what does this consortium cover, kind of one-off needs to update stuff, but what happens if we end up with a larger need?
Then
That
we would
would, like, go into
probably
that
need to hire out a
contract.
consultant for that. They've done a lot of one-offs for us, small. We've gone out and collected data. Many project managers ago, we went out, got a Trimble and the appropriate data. We had an intern, it was Donnell. She and the intern went out and collected a lot of data. He input a lot of that, but then the consortium helped us with that. They provide base maps for us, layers. Not so much base maps, but layers for our maps, things like that. So we've got to collect the data. It's the big thing.
I think one of the things that maybe for council is do we want to sort of set a target of like what we would like to see gathered that's like sort of the baseline information that might be missing? Is that something that we can have a conversation with the public works director?
Yeah, and they've already got a list of things that they need to collect data on. Storm drain and inverts, just locations, period.
Mystery sewer drains.
Yeah, exactly.
The whole nine.
Culverts that are out there that are not mapped, yeah, because the problem that we found and we knew this was going to occur is very paper-based system in public works, building, institutional knowledge walks out the door and all that data goes with them. And then you find out the hard way what's missing. So it's definitely something we're working towards, but it's been little fits and starts and the turnover is not.
Maybe now hope that we have something established then and we can work on like a mobility program, a GIS program. What are our goals so that we can make sure that we're being supported and that we're getting the most out of that effort? I think that would be something that we want to talk about.
You said mobility, so it just sparked something, but we do have through Transpo, they've been doing all that mapping for that. I provided you that link as well. So that's a different effort, but at some point, it'd be nice if all that was together in one location instead of some GIS maps here about your sewer and your water and your storm drain, and then over here, we got another map made by another entity that's, your mobility.
Yeah, having a single home for that, I think will be ideal when we get there. I know that's a lift, but. We could have,
All right, any other comments on that? Okay, so for those of you who are just joining, we're gonna go through this list that's on the screen and also it goes on to the next page. To find out what updates, we're seeing if we hit the benchmarks that those goals that we made last year have been met. And then we're gonna develop, after we go through this list, a list of topics for this upcoming. All right, so number 3, increasing the availability of housing in the city with an emphasis on affordability, diversity, and increased ADUs.
2 parts. The first part we're doing. And the deadline for that is June 15th to satisfy our Department of Commerce grant, mental health. Those need to be adopted for Tier 3 cities for July 1st. We had a great discussion in planning commission last week. And they are just diving into it. February and March are key. Then they're going to make a recommendation that'll come to city council. A primary discussion they have deals with this first sentence, which is we're required to have a discussion about mental housing and how far, and not just the discussion just can't focus on the minimum mandates. So they are deep inside of that. But at the very least, the minimum mandates will address the variable types, the quantities, and have a positive result. Those are all market value. They're also having a discussion about potential exceeding the minimum mandates with potential incentive for the affordability to hopefully address that. ADUs will be wrapped into it, and that's response to prior House Bill 1337. So that's automatic. The second part has not involved possibility, but with our June deadline and grant and contract with SCJ and heavy lift, it's not likely we're going to examine every tool, but list the tools for later conversation. So that should satisfy number 3 this year. Planning Commission is going to come forward with their work plan. They'll have an opportunity for council input. First part of the year, it's mental health.
Yes, and I appreciate the planning commission's work on this as well as yours and your departments. I know that in the community, there's been a significant, one of the reasons we listed land bank trade options is because there's been significant discussion in the community about that option. So will there be a chance that that will be discussed in the next few months?
Not as part of the middle housing. If it comes up, it's one of those parking lot items. There was that housing group that had the housing forum last fall.
Sure.
That's continuing. They're discussing what comes next. One of the members of that, I think they're working at Windermere, has had a couple of conversations about potential properties or sample properties in the Southern Gateway. I don't know what that group's plans are for this year, but that's more likely the place for that conversation. And if the planning commission is instructed to drill down in a particular topic, we can do that later in the year.
Thank you.
just as a comment, sort of tying 1, 2, and 3 together. Has there been any conversation around this additional housing and its impact with parking? So I know there's some parking requirements that are in the state laws. Is there any way that mobility program and like the GIS mapping of our streets can in any way help us create a cohesive sort of parking program? Like, how would we address that? Because each street's unique.
Yeah.
We may have the right of way width, but it may be steep slopes. So I mean, there's just a lot that goes into being around street parking, on
I
street
think
parking.
the key is framing the questions first.
Okay.
And so that whatever data and so forth can address the legislation we're putting in place. Broadly, we don't have a lot of curb cut and sidewalk once you get off arterials and so forth. So it's a bigger question. How GIS and safe streets, access to the lake and so forth fit into that would be addressed after the housing development regulations. There's one other element. Let the legislative session started. You've gotten that email about the transit-oriented development bill being introduced this coming year. That's the more likely opportunity for discussion.
Okay.
That's the 3 transit zones, the radius, and bigger impacts to parking.
Thank you.
Just wanted to make a clarifying point as I was looking at this list and noticing that these are 25, 26 council goals. As we went through that retreat and set those as goals for 25, 26 that we've then addressed through the budget. So just wanted to make the point that some of these we haven't touched, but kind of amazed at how much work we've gotten done, at least on a few of them already ahead of time. So.
It's been appreciated, thank you, yeah, and you're right, you know, the fact is that we have yet another year to work on these. All right, anything else on 3? Okay, turning towards the creating financial sustainability plan, do we get anywhere on that?
We haven't touched that yet. That's a large lift of work. I think that's good for some future discussion of budget and finance, what that looks like.
Sounds good. All right, number 5, improve multimodal safety through the collection and analysis of safety related data. So definitely connected to 1 and 2, but those standing votes. So
Yeah, and I think this is to Councilmember Goldman's point of more of that equity across the city and how are we going to measure success? He's got the words better than I do. I'm trying to channel you from a couple months ago, and I'm not doing a good job. But
So would that collection and analysis be part of like what Transpo's doing in there? I mean, would it tie with
I
that, or
think
is it
we-
kind of a separate?
I think we
effort
talked
in your
about it
opinion?
being matrix. That's what
Okay,
That's
oh,
what
that's
Goldman
the
and I
one.
talked about, is, you know, how does council want to measure that? What are the priorities? You know, as our first blush that we brought before budget and finance and is driving this year's overlay was we looked at, we have right of way widths, we have pavement widths, we knew which streets would support walkways separated with the extruded curving. And that's how we selected the roads that are going to be done this year, because we want to serve the need of, these were anywhere from orange to red on that map with Transpo, which means they've got to be done. And they also supported the ability to 201st up by Horizon View to install those walkways. So we're getting both ends of that through 2 different sources of funding. TBD, Transportation Safety Fund.
Thank you.
Councilmember Goldman.
Yeah, jumping off that, I think the idea of us coming up with some matrices, it's kind of a through line with mobility, safety, equity. Some of the ones I was thinking about were for where we would put traffic cameras, where we can build sidewalks, where we're going to do street overlays and curbs. But just having the council kind of explicitly weigh in on what factors we think are important to consider for sort of a holistic matrix.
Thanks. And Deputy Mayor Bodie, we weren't ignoring you. I was just hoping that your signal would get stable enough. Did you have any comments on the first 5 city council?
No, I'm having a really hard time with my Zoom link working. I've been trying 2 devices, but for some reason things are bad. So I am not able to get my video working or my name on the screen or my account information. So thank you. I can hear you. And I will chime in whenever, but I'm kind of impaired a little bit here. I can't figure out, I tested it at home and it all worked, so something's wrong. My apologies.
No worries. And yeah, do chime in anytime, since I don't think I'm able to see a hand from her, right?
Didn't show up.
Okay, it
Yeah.
should show up. Okay, great.
Lori, in your defense, I had the same problem yesterday. So Zoom did an update, new computer, all sorts of issues. So
Yeah, it seems
well.
like what has worked in the past is not working, and I've tried it like 3 different times. So I'm going to listen in and participate only when essential. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so moving on to the next page then, number 6 is hiring a climate plan administrator. I think we've taken like fairly good steps on this, in the sense that we have the proviso that suggests that once the immediate crisis, the budget crisis is averted, that the monies collected from the solid waste utility tax will start going towards funding this position. So,
And I believe it suggested looking at it in the midline.
right.
As a measure.
For your two. Collect this year, look at implementation here too.
All right, wonderful. Number 7, redesignate Perkins Way as a one-way westbound to enhance safety and create increased area for walkways. But there's been some discussion, I guess, as there.
Indeed, there has, Vice Chair Fertani. We've talked about this for literally for more than a decade, and we have not had the bandwidth, quite simply, to figure out the best approach to this. It's going to take some engineering. I think the biggest challenge here right now that I see is the deferred maintenance on that road. We have multiple sewer lines, including the system from Brightwater that comes through there. There's all sorts of issues that I have real serious concerns about in terms of capital investments that we have. So there is a serious advantage, honestly, in looking at what the public has been looking for quite a while about closing that road off to through traffic because of the impacts to the roadway from vehicles and heavy trucks particularly. So I walked it yesterday, and my gosh, folks, if you haven't done that for a while, please do, because there's probably $2 million worth of work that's going to have to be done on that road coming up in short order.
So I think I was intrigued, I think the community as well as the suggestion, I think it was the Parks Board that said, like, could we do like a weekend type closure? As sort of like a short-term, non-committal test and I'm thinking that is maybe for us to look at this year is to just kind of pull the trigger on something that's like a limited term to see how it works. My first thought is because it's the interurban link to the Burt Gilman, maybe we close it for, is it May that they do the Bike to Work month?
Yeah.
So like we could coincide with
Great
that so that it will make that
You bet.
connection safer during that month. So I think maybe this, as we look at moving this forward in this next year, maybe we take a step versus full committal, because I hear you, Mayor, that there's maybe full committal is a bit not financially feasible, right? But I think we can still do something as the community has been asking for, like you said, over a decade.
Deputy Mayor. Oh, yeah, sorry. Oh, the Deputy Mayor, sorry.
Yes, thank you. Just speaking to that, the Parks Board has been interested for a while in limited closure, maybe a couple of weekends in the summer, maybe on a Sunday, up to, I think that what we talked about was 192nd, something like that. It could be in conjunction with some other city activity or event at Animal Acres if we wanted to. But so I support what Councilmember Riddle's saying, and we could even just do one weekend as a trial and see, not the whole weekend, but one day of a weekend. But that was the concept that the Parks Board was playing around with to see how that would go. I don't think they were looking at anything permanent, but just to give people the benefit of walking safely on Perkins.
Thanks, Deputy Mayor. And I think, I have this weird memory, right, of us doing that for like the 5K run.
We did. Yeah,
Okay, we
you
did.
bet.
Okay, I'm
You
not
bet. There
crazy.
were
Okay,
several
good,
hundred
good.
people. I was just going to mention that.
Okay.
Vice Chair Fertani. We did. It was very successful. Chief Harden made me look really bad because he was much faster than it was in the run. But they're absolutely, it's been tried. And to Councilman Riddle's comment earlier, for me, it's more, I think actually closing the road is going to be cheaper than it's going to be to try to maintain it through traffic, continue through traffic. So we've had concerns that there are people that are avoiding the school walk zone situation. Anecdotally, that certainly seems to be the case. Not a surprise. But at the same time, we have to be very informed about what the impacts are for emergency vehicles and other things. The other thing I would say on this front, I think there's an opportunity too to try out some interim measures like speed pillows that the emergency vehicles and straddle to help slow people down. When I was on the road yesterday, there were bikers, walkers. I mean, it was a beautiful day and there were a lot of people out. So finding a way to make sure that those folks are safe as well as the people. My little one was at a play date at one of the neighbors' houses there along the road. And I can tell you that it's very, very dangerous just to pull off to the side of the road to let someone out. So even at a residence, and I think we've got to find a way to get that calmed down to a place where it's a neighborhood feeling for everyone, as well as taking advantage of a beautiful amenity in our community that should be celebrated, quite honestly.
Thank you. All right, then number 8, improve safety at SR 522 through safety improvements such as lower speed limit, etc.
So you got one section that WashDOT lowered. They have stated they will not lower the other section until the Sun Transit project is completed. Lighted crosswalks we haven't looked at yet. Director Perigo did reach out to WashDOT some improvements over here at 522 and 104. Haven't heard anything on that recently. Speed cameras are being studied as part of the transpo study that they're doing right now. So get a little bit of movement on that road.
Quick question now. I know that the plan when Sound Transit comes in is to signalize the lights, but I'm wondering, can't they do that earlier? Can't they signalize the lights at 165th and 153rd now to help with some of the traffic?
Signalize them in what way?
Signalize the lights. So right now they're just fixed lights and they're not, they could be maybe set better. Do you know?
Synchronize.
Synchronized.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
synchronized.
I believe they're all connected fiber optically. We're having this same discussion on SR 104 about their fiber optic cables,
That's
how they're all
correct.
tied together.
But
They're
they
actually
seem- they
controlled
seem-
now.
Well, I'm just wondering, because they seem to back up, they don't seem to, 153rd and 165th as a set, don't seem to be tied together
Yeah.
very well.
We've had that complaint recently. There was an email to council about it. I responded to them.
Southbound,
The
yeah.
chief and his officers, they'll go out and look at the timing. They have a connection at WashDOT. They'll report their findings to them. If they see an issue, to have them come out and address that. We had the same thing over here at 522 and 104. And there was a timing issue. They came out and repaired that, so.
So to be fair, this is very new. I mean, it's in the last couple of years. Previously, it was literally, they would have to come out and it was like the latest 1980s technology.
Oh,
It was legacy technology in a box that they had to come out and you could see somebody there with a laptop, uploading a new set of data. So, and parameters and the reality is that there isn't real time. Like in Seattle, they have a data center, a traffic safety center, I don't know what it's called, where they actually can improve the timing based on traffic flow in real time. This is algorithmically based, so it's not, it's sort of a dumb machine still, but a light year ahead of where it was before.
Yeah, the explanation, so we've gotten back from them is it's not in real time. It looks at previous data and kind of goes through an algorithm to try and project what that is, and it will adjust, but it's not the latest technology.
well, what would it take to put better technology there? I mean,
Them to spend more money.
no, my question is, I'm not sure, do they do it?
They have to do it.
They
It's not
do it,
us.
yeah.
Yeah, it's absolutely washed up.
All right.
They would love it if we paid for it.
How about Sound Transit pay for it? They're upright.
No,
It'll help their
thank you, we're not
buses.
paying for it.
They're not.
They get to preempt.
So,
Well, I guess that's just if it was Q jump, sorry.
yeah,
Wrong tech.
let's not go down that route.
No,
I
sorry.
will say that there was a conversation that I was listening to part of that. I thought there was 2 35-mile-an-hour signs going northbound as you come off the Seattle city limits. I think I only saw one last time I was there. I don't know if some vandalism
Councilmember
happened.
Good has brought this up as well. We need to look at.
I
that
think
and see
one of them
if
has
they're
got
there.
knocked down
I think
because there
so.
was at least 2 each direction. I
Yeah.
remember this because the day that they informed us they were doing it, I was like, oh my gosh, we actually got some traction with WashDOT here and I mean, we've been talking about this, so the first reduction from 45 to 40 was 2013, which I championed. And with a bunch of help from a lot of friends on the council, and here we are, you know, it took us 10 years to get to the second round, which is, but we only get this tiny little section. So
Where is that supposed to be?
it's 145th to 153rd is where it's supposed to be. So we're, it appears that one of the signs near the watercress apartments, someplace in that area is gone.
Yeah.
So there is one definitively because after I think your comment, Paula, I went up and looked. The one at Taco Bell is still there, but that's it going northbound. I don't think there was, until you get to the 40-mile-an-hour speed limit, just past 153rd, you know, it's.
Yeah, so I think, or I suspect a challenge we're having with WashDOT is they're still using old, in some ways obsolete methodology for how they set speed limits.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, you know, with a new administration, a new chief of WashDOT, are there opportunities for us to lobby WashDOT to say adopt more up-to-date NACDO guidelines, things like that?
So part of the study that John and his crew are doing is to use our methodology and traffic counts. They put the tubes out on the road to actually look and make a suggestion as to why the speed limit should be 35 now, not the 40 that they're identified. We've looked at this, and even not being a traffic engineer, you can see that their justification for doing it in cities to the east, we meet the same criteria. So anyway, that is part of that study. Challenging that. I can say that the Northwest regional director is still the same, so there's not a change at that level.
Just on point, thank you for your question, Larry. The couple of things. One, I do know that there's a considerable paradigm shift within WashDOT. We've seen it at Seashore. The representative for WashDOT has indicated that they're much more interested in a holistic approach. You know, that considering safe routes to school, all these different things, and getting away from the 85th percentile. The other thing I would mention too is that our chief, just recently informed us that there is going to be a law enforcement safety seminar in Spokane this July, specifically focused on reducing injuries and challenges on roadways. And the primary focus of that is the holistic approach, which we have been leaders at, and many thanks to you all for that. So I'm hopeful that we're certainly going to have representation there. I'm trying to see if I can find the time to get over there myself, and I think it would be instructive for me. And it is very heartwarming to hear that there are shifts, and I'm hearing it from Senator Elias at the it's the Senate Transportation Chair, that they're really trying to look at things holistically. WashDOT is WashDOT. I'll leave it there.
And to the mayor's point, if you have ear to bend with one of our representatives or our senator, that one of the biggest things that we hear from WashDOT is while they have these mandates, the funding has not increased to match those mandates. So even though we're supposed to get a complete street design on 104 when they do that project, they said the funding does not exist to build that in that time frame. So yeah, get the chance, bend some ears. We did when we legislative steering committee met with our two representatives, let them know that the issues we have with SR 104 and what we heard back from WashDOT. There's obviously a funding problem in the state.
It's a very good point. State seems to be very happy doing that sort of thing. So, yeah. Okay, so increase number 9, increase the detail of the critical areas inventory through more accurate details of wetlands and unstable slopes.
This is very much underway and it's unfunded, and the short summary is we're looking for other people's work. The current critical area map is a guide, code is clear, and then you do site specific analysis when you have a proposal. What we're finding is everyone has to do site specific analysis. So we're trying to get our map to be more. We have an electronic version floating around, we're testing. Drew, our urban forest planner, had some ARC GIS skills, and she's interested. And we're supplying her with layers and trying out that electronic format and seeing the usability. Behind the scenes, we're looking for other people's data. What exists, how accurate, how complete can we have it? And we're starting from the most frequent download. So we have a lot of streams, we have a lot of slopes. We have a source that's unfunded that can ground truth, come here, show us where our streams actually are, and type them and give us a map. We did it in Cambridge Island. I'm all set for that, to understand it. And then maybe bring in the council. The one thing I'm missing is the answer to how much is that? If it turns out, oh, it's volunteer time, which I don't think, easy choice, but it's not budgeted right now, but it's a sample of one category. That ground truthing has not occurred. Every map of every level of streams is very inaccurate. Are they there? Yes. Is it on this lot or that lot? You have to go to the site. So we're doing a lot of site visits. Slopes are the other one. We're hoping we can grab that at a regional level. And then have a contour that really helps us out. And then that'll cover most lots, and then we can drill down to frequent flooded areas, wetlands, and maybe rely on some Army Corps data, FEMA firm maps. And then there's others that I don't know what to do, erosion, seismic. So, but we're trying to progress that with what we have. And then if we were to explore the previous one with the GIS, we can perfect the usability website, and then the property owner, applicant, architect would have something to deal with, less questions about what do I have to do, and I develop my property. So,
And I will say, one of the drivers behind me suggesting this was people who are trying to do tree permits, if they're within that are vague areas, that is what we have now for like critical areas, they have to bring in a high cost, to get their site specific done. And it just the sort of that balance of equity for folks, you gotta, it just, those who can afford it will better manage their trees. It didn't feel right to me. So in addition to development, which obviously will take advantage of this, I think it's just the average person doing their normal maintenance on their properties will be seeing a great advantage from this, and it'll be evening the playing field just a bit more.
And with current staff, we're already doing a little bit better. Instead of the response being, here's the code, you go figure it out, or we don't have time. It's, how about I do a site visit with you? We understand the code. I'll stand there in your front yard, do a reasonable person test before you go invest or hire somebody. If I stand there and it's flat and the nearest street's a mile away, I can tell them with faith, you don't have the code area. So we're already doing that part, but the mapping really helps because that's often their first stop.
Yeah, sometimes they'll see the map, and they just won't even try.
I appreciate your department doing that, and I'm wondering, has the state updated what critical areas are recently, or is it pretty much the same definitions as we had a decade ago?
The types are pretty much the same, but it's the best available science, and we are overdue for a critical area ordinance update.
Right.
We have other priorities, and there's no downside. Ours is already very strong,
Right.
so we're not in any danger. We're not on any list of being insufficient. Do we have to update it? Yes, but not so much in the types. And the mapping should take care of that. It's the terminology, the best available science, where it's referenced, and we do need to do that.
Sounds great. Deputy Mayor Bodie. Deputy Mayor Bodie. There's her hand up. Okay, maybe so. Are we not? Does it sound?
Yeah, it should be able to hear us.
Hello, can you hear me?
Hey.
Okay, I am so sorry. It is this Zoom interface that I'm using right now is so funky. All the good aspects of Zoom don't seem to be working well. So I only wanted to add, I think it's an excellent discussion on updating critical areas information. I only wanted to add that I recall seeing within the last couple of years a soil liquefaction in case of earthquake sensitive zones on a map that had been put together by, I think, the state. But it seems to me that should also be a resource that we could use in taking a fresh look at our critical areas, existing information that's out there. Because knowing those zones, and I think a lot of town center and a lot of stream side areas are included in that, but there were some surprises on it, as I recall. So just a suggestion.
We'll take a look. They do have some resources we implemented elsewhere after the Oso landslide.
Right.
That'd be an example of something they stepped forward, created that we wouldn't have to pay for.
Yeah,
Yeah, in
great. Thank you.
fact, I believe they have it at the county level, because the critical areas mapping often is at the county level. One hazard we don't have, for instance, mine hazards, disused mine hazards, but I know that liquefaction is one of them, so that might be a source of information. All right, thanks. For 10, identify and reduce areas within the city that have frequent police and fire calls / service uses. Actually, any updates?
I know the chief anecdotally knows of the issues
Yeah,
throughout the
you bet.
city. But I can tell you that I just met with him this afternoon. It's pertinent. They had a meeting with all the owners or the shop owners within town center recently. I'm talking to them about safety and security and maybe a flock, which is the license plate readers that private owners put within parking lots. That's so Merlot Geyers, forget their titles, property managers were there. So they had that discussion with them and some of the property owners. So, this is a great tool that helps identify repeat offenders that keep coming to the town center time and time again. So they are looking at those types of solutions throughout the city. But as far as going and identifying new ones, I don't think that groundwork's been able to be done just due to staffing.
And I think
Other work product last year.
And I think you illustrated that point in your city administrator's report of one of its uses just recently, right?
Yeah, the chief had something.
That's pretty nice.
The problem that was at Woodland North is gone. So I haven't checked on how many responses they've had, but I don't see them anymore. They used to be there every other day. And the problem tenant is no longer there. So I think that I don't see any emergency response. I was very concerned about that. And I think that problem is, at least for that area, has been greatly reduced.
And just on point too, Chief and I and Phil have had conversations about a variety of these topics relative to frequent calls, et cetera. And I think that one of the important things to recognize is if we have a business that is having frequent calls from police because of retail theft, et cetera. The PD has been fantastic at working with those organizations and trying to get them to, provide their own security. At the same time, we are not a multinational corporation, and we have multinational corporations within our jurisdiction, and they need to step up and find ways to make sure that we are not retail theft police. We respond, but at the same time, with limited resources in our PD, we cannot be the people that are going and dealing with things that are not life-threatening. We need to be serving our citizens in a variety of manners. So that's a conversation that's going to be ongoing, and I assure you all that that's one that Merlot Geyer and I are going to have this year about making sure that the security is stepped up, because there's a distinct lack of security at a variety of businesses. I hear from managers, and it's not just Ross, it's 3 different businesses that have real serious challenges that distract our department from other important facets of their work, and take them off the street, which we need them to be on the street. So I'll leave it there.
Thank you, Mayor. All right, great. Thank you, everybody, for your updates. Doing a time check, we have 15 minutes till the regular business meeting. So how would you like to proceed? Because I don't think we have enough time to have a robust discussion of our agenda. I do note that there's another committee of the whole meeting next month before the tree. So what would a prudent course of action? I may suggest basically that we look at this list and all the things that we need to follow up on, some of them basically don't need as much follow-up. Clearly, since we've accomplished a lot of it, but all of them probably could use some, at least, refinement. Would it be appropriate to basically have each of you, or at least anybody at the council who wants to basically send this list with the numbers that we have, plus basically the refinements that you'd like to see on them, that'd be appropriate. I could compile them and bring them to the next committee of the whole meeting. Okay, and answer, okay, excellent. All right, so let's do that then, and then I look forward to seeing how you want to basically proceed from here, so thanks. And Deputy Mayor Bodie, does that seem appropriate?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Vice Chair Furtani, for leading us through this, and thank you all for a robust discussion. I missed a bit here and there, but I think it's a great list and a good conversation. So I encourage you to get suggested more suggestions on further detail to me and Councilmember Furtani.
Oh,
I just wanted to point out that that's like a week before the retreat.
Oh. Okay, well,
How about the first work session next month?
okay, then
You
that would-
utilize that, I don't think we have.
Mayor said, will that be all right?
Absolutely,
Okay.
that's your pleasure,
All right.
you bet. Let's do
That sounds great to me as well. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. All right, then, I guess since our agenda is literally that item, I'm going to adjourn the meeting. See you upstairs.
there's.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
So the new Zoom update,
Yes.
Phil, did you notice yesterday in the meeting that I was in with you guys?